All right, we're here looking at I tore apart this is an RD200 motor off the first Soul Power Fat Pipe team up. And this is Byron, my teammate and Fat Pipe owner. This is Byron's, well, it was Byron's dad's last bike, which is actually a super cool story. I believe he was, what, 84 or something like that when he was still riding. I may have to correct that later, but as his dad got older, he's a lifelong motorcyclist. And as he got older, he just weaker, you can't hold up big bikes. So he kept getting smaller and smaller bikes, that he could hold up at stoplights and stuff. This was his last bike. And then Byron turned it into a race bike, which they were both lifelong, kind of racing enthusiasts. So super cool story with this. These are the stock rods. This motor has never been apart except for the clutch rebuild. And so these rods are actually a little more worn than I like. There should always be some play. I don't know how much you can see there on that, but there's a little bit of play there, a little more than I'd like. What I actually do is I put a dial gauge on them and I check the side shake. Now back and forth, generally on assembly, you have about 30 thou that goes back and forth. I'm at, of course, these are shorter rods, because that's the thing, you got to remember that. Of course, the longer the rod, the more shake there's going to be. On a 115 rod, these have about 50 thou. So while they feel kind of bad, I mean, gauge-wise, they're not awful. It doesn't sound, the bearings sound a little worn. To me, it's a little, the crankset seems a little worn to me, but we are short on time. Not particularly comfortable with it, but we are short on time, and we're trying it. This bike has to be out on the track in Georgia, February 18th, and then March 18th, whatever it is, 1 month later. Then it gets torn down. Different, we're going to do the full, rebore everything, take care of everything. The cylinders, make sure I don't mix them up here. These rings, we did have one set of rings stuck. These are the Wiseco version, which is actually pretty darn good. They are still, of course, domed piston. For my last video, I converted to flat top. I took all the rings off, cleaned everything up, lubed it up. The rings are free. Everything's good that way. Bores are good. There was a little bit, what is that? The right cylinder, I guess. I have them marked there, but there was definitely some blow-by there. So that obviously, I'm not going to be doing anything with this, actually, on this one, because we've just got to basically button it back up for Roebling in Georgia in February. The only other thing he did do is he did convert to a vape ignition system. It's been really good to us. Not a single problem with it. And so, yeah, so I'm not particularly comfortable with the crank, but between crank, top ends, the other interesting thing, which is why I was going to show it to you, was the head wash on this. Now this was all cleaned up, and this has been run 3 years. I couldn't even really tell you because we didn't really keep track of hours, but it's basically run 3 seasons. I got my road race license on this. Byron got his license on it, and now our friend Cliff is also riding it. But you see how there's this is the top as it would sit. That's the right side. And you see how the formation there. One thing about that is with the early Yamahas, and I don't know how well you're going to be able to see it. Maybe with a flashlight. I don't know if this is going to work at all or not. But if you can see in there, the one thing that Yamaha did on the B transfers, the B transfers being the upper, A's, B's, and then C, the central. One thing that Yamaha did in the 70s with the B's was they angled them like forward, almost 45 degrees. Now, in modern day, this would all be directly perpendicular to the piston crown. I'm guessing, I mean, Yamaha knew what they were doing. They weren't just winging it, you know. I would like to think that, you know, a bit of speculation. I think the B's aiming forward, plus with a relatively primitive, or these 70s bikes had a relatively primitive boost port. That combination of the B's, you know, aiming forward, and then the C port aiming forward pretty heavily, brought a good wash up, which kept fresh mixture in the cylinder and rather than spilling out the exhaust. And I believe that works at lower RPMs. I believe that works. Now, this is at road race speeds. So you see our right cylinder. Now, these barrels are completely untouched. I didn't do any porting, even any cleanup work. The right cylinder does that. And sure enough, even the left cylinder, of course, it's worse, but it does the same thing. So I think that has to do with the constant fresh mixture at high velocity between the B's and the C on this upper half of the cylinder. Let's see, it goes that well. I got it mixed up now. But yeah, I think that has to do with that constant flush through, which again may be good for road bikes, but race bikes, you generally are going to want these B transfers. Yeah, the B transfers in here to be across the piston face, not so, you know, sharp facing upward towards the head. So we might modify these later. The other race bikes, we actually already have modified them. But it's just interesting to see how the change in port, you know, that definitely tells you a bit of how things have been running, as well as Rich, of course, but running a good amount of hours on this top end at this point. So we're going to get this bolted back up and get our race bike back together, and then we're going to get 2 more RD200s out on the track this year. So it's going to be a big year, so it should be fun.